Welcome to episode 50 of the XrmToolcast. In this episode, Scott and I interview Imran Akram, the current maintainer of the plugin registration tool for the XrmToolBox. We walk through the history of the tool, talk about some future abilities Microsoft is announcing with the ability to register additional DLLs for your plugins to reference. We walk through DLL Hell and trade some more stories with the registration tool, as well as a recent bug that even Tanguy was hit by. So, sit back and relax, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XrmToolcast. With me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar, and Scott, the man with the golden voice. Daryl, how's it going, Scott?
Really good, thank you. Oh, golden voice. I always look forward to seeing what you're going to say about me. You know, it's always
I
exciting.
kind of have to make it up on the fly, and with my voice being rather scratchy this morning, I could hardly talk. So I've been trying not to chat. I've had meetings all day. I think I had an hour and a half. I didn't have a meeting besides up in straight meetings. So
I just thought you were putting on your best podcast. Your best podcast voice. It just sounds really good. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm wearing my retro Azure T-shirt today, which is good for radio, you know, but good for podcast. But it's retro now because they've changed the logo. So I need to update my wardrobe now for all of the new logos. This is the thing about Microsoft rebranding the logos all the time is that. Or icons. We always get told off for calling it a logo. It's not a logo, it's an icon. Is that right? Or is it the other way around? I don't know.
I thought that it was a logo and the file is an icon file. I don't know. That's not the point of today's discussion. We'll have to go to something else. But so for today, we've brought in a first-time guest with a tool that is well known, well used, and one of the top tools in the XrmToolBox. And he is the current maintainer, although I don't think he was the original creator, but you have to love the person that's making changes and improving it now more than the person that did it to begin with. So in that case, I'd like to introduce Imran Akram. How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. So the tool that we were going to talk about today is the plugin registration tool. That's a part of the XrmToolBox. It has a long history because it originally was Microsoft's, and then someone took it and made it an actual tool. So, Imran, do you have a history on that? The history of how that happened and how it was created at all? Do you know the backstory?
Yeah, the code actually came from CRM 2011 SDK. Microsoft open sourced it, and Alexei and Jonas took it upon themselves to make it compatible with XrmToolBox. And should we take a break or?
No, Daryl's he's just standing up and stretching. For those of you who are not watching YouTube, Daryl just looked like he was about to walk away or something. I mean, was it the mention of the CRM 2011 SDK or something that upset you? I don't know.
Just gonna.
No, I normally try to stand up for these because my chair is very, very noisy. So sorry, Imran. So the original source code came from the 2011 SDK, and they stopped deploying that. And then what happened?
Yeah, they open sourced it and stopped deploying it. And Jonas and Alexei, my former colleagues at InnoFactor, they took it upon themselves to make it compatible with XrmToolBox, and it started to be available there since then. And then I came along in about 2017, I think. There was a feature requirement by our product owner back then to be able to, for example, save a description on plugins or assemblies and be able to have them on in an Excel file. So I thought, okay, this could be a feature in the plugin registration tool, and I started working on the source code, and I built the first export feature on it, and since then it just came to my board. I started to work on it, and now I'm basically maintaining the source code, taking care of the pull requests, etc.
Yeah. So that's a really, really nice feature I've used before. Is that ability to export all of your plugin registrations all in Excel file. It's huge when you walk into a brand new client and they're like, what do I have? what happened? Let me know, they're upgrading to a new version or there's some new incompatibility you need to take care of. And you can use that to grab all the DLLs they have, all the different plugin classes they have and everything else. So that's at least one area where that tool is actually different or more advanced than the one that Microsoft currently gives. Is that something that you're going to continue to look to do, is add newer features, or is it you just kind of maintain it, or what's your idea with that?
Yeah, the idea is to improve it further. There is also a need to add some more stuff to the export, like the multi-select pick list support, for example. There's also some new features added by other contributors like Tangi and Betimpeja, I would like to mention, and also there was one from E050. He developed a whole new feature of supporting webhooks on the this XrmToolBox plugin registration tool. So this was a feature that became available from CRM version 9, and he just went in and made a whole pull request on it. So it was pretty awesome. Although I haven't used webhooks that much, but it's still usable out there. Tangi has made some pretty fantastic improvements. Like, for example, in the UI, there's when you go in and you're supposed to filter attributes. You just have to scroll down in the whole long list of attributes and do the checkboxes. But now you can just type in and it filters automatically, and it's a pretty handy feature.
So those people who are at the moment using the one from Microsoft, what would you say would be the killer reason to use the XrmToolBox plugin registration tool over and above the one that comes from Microsoft? Because it is a bit of a pain to get it from the Microsoft. You got to go and download the SDK from NuGet and all that kind of stuff, whereas the XrmToolBox is right there. So convenience is already there, right? But is there any other kind of killer features that you say, well, I have to use this because it doesn't do it in the out of the box one?
Everyone loves the WinForm UI. It's all about the WinForm UI.
Yeah, I guess convenience is number one, and the UI improvements also. I think the filtering of attributes. There's also this feature that, for example, if you're upgrading a project. Let's say you have an assembly that has a major version 8.1 and another assembly with the same name, but with the major version 9.1 or something. So those two will be registered simultaneously with the same name. So now you can see the version number right next to them, and you'll know which one is which. You don't have to look at the properties window and check if the version is the same. There's also some other features like Tangi developed that, for example, if you're updating an assembly, it will remember your path that you used previously, so you don't have to go to the same folder over and over again. So it's like it's by developers for developers. I would definitely advocate for you MVPs out there to help Microsoft, help this message get to Microsoft to open source their current plugin registration tool. Why not? Like, I don't see why they have to keep it closed source.
I guess the source at some point, obviously, that copy that was in the CRM 2011, it's just kind of like morphed on from that and moved into what it is today. So I suspect there's probably a lot of code that is still the same. So as a fork goes, it's probably not massively different in a lot of the places. But yeah, I do agree with you. I think there's always legal issues that are always cited around open source, but I think those seem to be less so now, because a lot of other stuff that's been released recently, like the SOPA tool, the Power Apps solution packager, that's now just a normal open source project and anyone can contribute to it. So I think these days there's more avenues to open source, but maybe it's to do with the fact that the source was legacy, and the legal issues around that. I don't know, but who knows? I mean, the fact is it was already released. Surely that means that it could be open sourced.
Did you, I think what I heard once upon a time was that the change from WinForms to the new Windows Presentation Foundation that's now in the SDK was just like a summer intern that had some time, and so he just went and like, all right, you go update this, and so that's why we got the Windows Presentation Foundation version, and that's why it's newer and different than what it was before. But I think when they did that, I think there used to be extra stuff that they lost when they did that change, right? Wasn't there was it sorting or filtering, something that lost when Microsoft made that change? And that was painful for a while. But yes, the sorting and filtering feature in the one in the toolbox is amazing. They've added that to the one SDK now as well. I think Matt Barber had some time on a weekend. He went through and updated it or something silly like that. But
they also had a pretty terrible bug in the old SDK tool. The tree view would get out of sync. For example, if you go into another window where you had the tree view for updating something, and if you had deleted a step before, the new tree view that popped up in the window, that would show the previous steps available. And then that would cause some null exceptions and so on. So it took me quite a while to actually fix that. So
yeah, that one bit me a lot.
Oh yeah, that was a nasty one.
I think I just restarted it and it worked each time or something, but it was just annoying. But it wasn't annoying enough that I went and retyped in my credentials and logged back into the SDK tool. So
I think that is the single most annoying thing, isn't it, about the SDK plugin registration tool? The fact that you just don't have that ability to use a connection that you previously opened. That I think that's gonna all, and it's Imran, you said about convenience being the top, and I think that is a big deal, isn't it? Just being able to go, oh, okay, I can select from my long list of environments and just log in and it remembers it, rather than it popping up with that login and having to go and type in your username and password each time, which is really frustrating.
Yeah, definitely.
First world problems, right?
But yeah,
I got
serious problems.
Password. Oh, this is so annoying. Oh no. Yeah, but it is though. It is. So, so have you had a feature request, Imran, to do an automatic republish at all? Like have it set up a file watch and say, okay, I want you to watch this file and automatically keep on pushing it whenever I make changes to it?
Yeah, we have a plugin actually for this. It's called Auto Deployer Tool. Okay. I have just published it on XrmToolBox last week. It's under validation process, so it will be out soon. That was also developed by Alexei originally. So the idea is that you select a plugin and you just keep on working in your Visual Studio. As soon as you build it, it will be just published. So you get the updates in almost immediately.
I guess that's good if you're the only person working on that environment. I guess, if you're kind of building it and it always just deploys it, you probably wouldn't want that to happen if you had lots of other people working on the environment. It might annoy them. But that sounds like a kind of a definite time saver.
Why did you need a new tool for that, Imran?
Yeah.
Come on. You could just add it in.
Yeah, we could add it in also. Definitely.
I can see you've got an agenda here, Daryl, that you're pursuing.
Yeah. The reason I asked him out is so he could fix all the things I wanted to fix. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, just add a feature request. Yes. But definitely, it could be done. I'm actually thinking more in terms of building an integration. For example, you right-click an assembly and you select a path, and it could take you to that tool, and you have a whole watch list of assemblies that get updated automatically like this. Yeah, we could revamp it and move the feature into a plugin registration tool.
All right. I'm going to tell Tangy to not approve the auto deployer until you put it into the plugin registration tool. Just kidding. That'd be funny though. So yeah, but now Scott, you've already got your tool built in that does that with Sparkle, right? Does it auto deploy as well, or do you have to run a command line to deploy it?
No, yeah, you have to run a command line to do it. Yeah, there's no auto deploying. I mean, I tend to try and avoid the plugin registration tool generally, just because of the kind of the errors that can happen with, you know, picking the wrong message or adding the, you know, it's a very manual process. That's why I want to do it. Generally, I want to do it declaratively. So, you know, with Sparkle, you can actually put in your attributes on the plugins and they just automatically get picked out of code. And but of course, you know, if you want to, you can start with the plugin registration tool, and then you can instrument all your plugins from what you've created in your plugin registration tool. So it kind of goes both ways. But it's interesting because this whole kind of thing about Microsoft updating the plugin infrastructure and then obviously open source trying to play catch up is an interesting one, isn't it? Because, you know, there's one avenue you could say, well, it's better for Microsoft to do it because then it's fully supported and any new features they can make sure work. But on the other hand, you've got then all of the other things, Imran, you were talking about, you know, in terms of the other features that are added and all those kind of niceties. I think your strapline was built for developers by developers. It sounds like that should be definitely a marketing strapline there, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? There's pros and cons of both sides. Obviously, recently there's been full CRUD updates, CRUD support for virtual entities. So is that something that you're going to add into the XrmToolBox plugin registration toolbox?
I wish it's easy to say because, like, again, there's this black boxing thing. We don't have a clear idea how they're registering those things, the virtual entities and so on. That's why, you know, for example, if Microsoft puts the code out there on GitHub and we can build pull requests on it, that would be so much easier. Like someone now has to sit down and look at the implementation of virtual entities and how it's done at the moment, and do a similar implementation in our code, which is, as you know, it's still the CRM 2011 code base. But that's definitely on my wish list.
It's probably going to involve something like, you know, so disassembling the SDK one, although that probably contravenes all the license agreements. Because when you used to install stuff, they used to say you're not allowed to disassemble or anything like that, reverse engineer. So that's probably, you know, kind of nullifies all your warranties if you do that.
Yeah, so I can add a disclaimer. As soon as you touch a virtual entity, there's a pop-up.
Yeah. But the virtual entity, that whole CRUD update has been somewhat, it hasn't got very much press recently. It's not really being fanfared. It was just sort of slipped into the documentation. It's like, oh, by the way, you can do, you know, updates and deletes and inserts now. Yeah. I would have thought there'd be a much bigger. It is, right? You'd think there'd be a bigger fanfare, lots of hype for it, because it's been in use for the F&O virtual entities thing for quite some time now. How long has that been out in the wild? Definitely more than 6 months or something. But so it's definitely tried and tested, you know, because people have been using it. It's just that they've now published all the docs around it.
You know, one interesting thing about virtual entities is how are we going to manage the security issues? Like, you know, the data that sits in Dataverse has all the security roles and, you know, the whole security model around it. But in virtual entities, it's you could take it anywhere pretty much. You can put it in an external database and you know, how are you going to really make sure that the right roles are accessing that entities, like for the external data also, because, you know, there's this part that someone can go directly to that data source. Yeah,
definitely. Terms and conditions apply. If you're so there was the because there's now in AppSource the SQL virtual connector. I think that's what they're calling it, virtual connectors support. So you can add a connection to a SQL server, and then you get all your tables that are in your SQL server, and you can start. And it's using a service principal to do that. So yeah, obviously you're going to have to make sure that you manage all of the security, making sure people don't get access to things that they shouldn't be getting access to.
Now there's a new feature that's been described by Microsoft, but hasn't been announced when they're coming out with it, and that's the one that's probably been asked for plugin development since day one, which is to be able to upload supporting DLLs. Scott, did you see the little post on it where it kind of was like, hey, this is coming, or but they didn't give much details about it yet. That's kind of going to be a game changer, I think, for a lot of people working in that space. So Imran, I'm hoping that when that comes out, that you will immediately go through and add that to the tool, or else I'll have to go back to the SDK version when I need that feature and that functionality.
Yeah, I can imagine it's going to be quite a big update to do that. I mean, depending on how it's implemented, I can imagine there's going to be lots of things that will need to be put in there to enable. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. No more need to kind of compile in loads of libraries or use an unsupported IL merge or something like that.
I guess it's time to disassemble something.
Well, whatever it is has to have the logic already built into, or else we can't disassemble it. But yeah,
we've been working around the IL merge bit with shared projects, for example, and Git submodules, but it doesn't cater for the already the third-party assemblies, for example. That's always been a pain.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. I suppose it's going to be more like Azure Functions, where you can deploy and then you can deploy dependencies, and they kind of work. They just sort of deploy and just work, which is going to be really good. Yeah, because that has been one reason to use Azure Functions. If you've got some sort of complex libraries that had to be loaded inside your logic. So it'll be interesting to see how it ends up working in practice, because obviously, a sandbox server that's running your plugin, I'm presuming they must have some kind of performance profile of it, which it's optimized to run people's code that they're uploading an assembly of a certain size. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of that, from a performance standpoint.
I'm imagining they're going to have a list of dependencies, and all those are going to be like an extra table that has this plugin requires these other DLL dependencies, and then they've got to load those all up. So I'm guessing that means that you could really hurt your startup time for your plugins potentially if it needs to go through and do that. But it'll be interesting to see how that's done. There's some things in computer science where you're like, yeah, that's pretty cool, I could figure that out. And there's other things you're like, how do they do that? That's amazing. Primarily like any sort of searching of any web page, like how do they index every single page in the world and then be able to pull it up in milliseconds? Like, that's amazing. But yeah, so that's the whole idea of having it loaded in an efficient amount of time and manner is approaching the how are they going to do that level of things.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you got like side-by-side versioning, you got two assemblies, two plugin assemblies using the same library, but a different version. That's going to be,
there's a reason we use the term DLL Hell, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, those are the days. DLL Hell. Reg server 32.
Isn't these are the days? Or, no.
Oh, no. Yeah,
it's
compared
better.
to COM,
It's better.
definitely. With the Fusion loader of .NET, I mean, it does a pretty good job of, assembly bindings and, multiple versions. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. I mean, it could be like a lot of these things where a new feature's released and there's always like, one of those purple boxes, note. And then whenever I'm looking through the docs, docs on Microsoft.com, I go for the purple boxes first, because usually the purple boxes contain the really juicy stuff. Yeah. The stuff with... Is it just me?
Yeah, exactly. It happens quite a lot.
That's gonna have to be my next introduction for you, Scott Duro, the purple box hunter. Scott, the purple box hunter Duro. There we go. Gotta have it. There's a middle name. That's the way it should work. So
Next time, if you remember.
Next time.
Yeah.
So do you have anything that you are currently working on in the tool? Any new features that you're looking to go through? I'm looking at the GitHub repo. We have quite a few enhancement requests. Actually, two of the top three were opened by Jonas, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah, one of them is the ability to, for example, select an assembly and disable or enable all steps in it together. So, that happens, for example, when you're going to do a data import or is going to run some kind of external job. You need to disable or enable plugins immediately. So if you have a lot of steps, you just, it's a really boring thing to just right click and disable, and then you get the pop-up OK, and then again. I started working on it some time ago, but then I sort of went into some other things. So I'll try and get back to it.
All right.
Well, it's open source, so so Jonas can provide a pull request. Surely, if he really wants that feature.
Yeah.
He's not here, so I can say this.
Most recent feature he has is merge the auto deployer. So he's 5 months ahead of me because he asked for that back in December.
Yeah.
Auto deployer was part of we had this single project containing 3 plugins. Now I have separated 2 of them, the steps manipulation tool and auto deployer. So they're coming in as separate plugins, and then the next step would be to do the integration part. There's also a very internally this has been in demand in our company to have more things besides just the assembly. For example, we need to have certain JavaScripts or web resources as part of the auto deployment routine. So, for example, if you're building something on Node.js, we do a build, and it just goes straight into CRM.
Isn't that what Fiddler's for?
Yeah, it is. But I don't know. It could be a good approach.
There's
it's like
10
all
different ways
things
to skin that cat, isn't there?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's what's great about this industry is there's always different ways of doing it, different thought processes, and it's important to explore them all because they all lead down to different possible avenues, and then they might converge in the future. Who knows? It's always good to have different options for different scenarios. Do you find that you have to spend a lot of time maintaining the tool? I mean, in terms of how much does your employer give you time to do that, or do you have to do it in your spare time?
Yeah, it's kind of both. Sometimes, my employer also gives me leeway, and I also use some of my free time also. I've been sitting and looking at this stuff. So it does take a toll on you. So that's why, I sort of work in bursts. I come back to it after, let's say, 2 weeks, sometimes a month, and just rigorously work on it for a day or two, and then get back to my normal routine.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've got a system that works. It's hard to find a system to find the balance.
Yeah, especially with life happening around you, with kids at home and schooling and all that. It's tough, but that's open source.
So I have a funny plugin registration tool story. Back in like 2000 and I want to say 14 maybe. I was at what was the big technical conference for CRM that got bought by Dynamics Communities. It wasn't Dynamics Communities, but Dynamics Communities bought them like 3 years ago. Extreme. Yes. So so I was like Extreme 3 CRM, whatever it was, before they renamed it. And it was my first time going to a conference like that. Was not an MVP. I sit down at the opening meeting, and Daniel Kai sits down next to me. The very first MVP I met in person. So I'm kind of like geeking out about, hey, cool, Dan's sitting next to me. I know him. Like, I know what he does. Like, cool. And so I'm working next to him, and the presentation is just getting started. And I had to do a little bit of work. I had to fix a little plugin in our dev environment. And I was using the plugin registration tool. And by default, when you load it up, it wouldn't check all of the steps, all the plugins. So if you load the assembly, it gives you a list of all the plugins in the assembly, and you had to check like the top tree list to select all of the plugins. And if you don't, it will unregister them all. And I accidentally did that right in the beginning of the presentation, and it was actually in a pre-prod environment where they were like doing testing and stuff. And so I was like, oops. So I had to quickly run and grab a look at the registrations from another environment, and then go back and put them back in there, because I had no ALM process at all. So that was.
I love those stories.
It's a great story.
I love those. Yeah, I call them war stories. All right, and I love collecting war stories. Maybe we should have a whole episode about this. But it's like, was it ALM? A lot of times people are sort of talking about, oh, you need ALM, you need ALM. But then a lot of the times it's like, well, do I really need ALM? But I think, war stories like that, the examples of why actually doing this way stops these things happening. Even though it may not have happened to you yet, they could possibly happen in the future.
Yeah, I've seen a similar situation myself. Luckily, we have ALM, and I quickly went into an older version, just imported an unmanaged solution. It was a dev environment, so we got all the steps back, and then you can just update the assembly to get the latest code in, and then you're good to go. So people out there, you should have a solution just with the plugins and steps, and that's it. It really helps a lot.
Is there anything else about the tool that we have missed out on, or anything else that you're working on, Imran, that we need to make sure we let our listeners know about?
There's also a handy feature I'd like to mention about filtering assemblies. That, for example, if you're on a dev environment with a mix of unmanaged and managed assemblies, so you can go to the filter assemblies button on top and just check the box. Just show me unmanaged assemblies, and it will filter the tree for you. And you can also type in a text, for example, and you can get a filtering based on the name. So these are small but useful features, and that was thanks to Tanguy, by the way.
Yeah, that's almost should be the default, I think, almost, is to filter all of the managed plugins. Because what can you do with a managed? I guess you can edit the registrations. Right?
Yeah, it's always freaked me out that you can see like the CRM, out of the box stuff in there. It's freaked me out, but it's also this little bit of a kind of actually that's interesting. What was it doing? How does it work? Little inquisitive nature there. But yeah, the fact that you can see all of the managed stuff is not actually. Yeah, why would you need that? Why would you want to see that? Other than if you were, I guess, checking something had been deployed. And probably the plugin registration tool is probably not the right place to do that.
One thing that I may create an issue on the GitHub site. Actually, Tanguy got bit by, I think it was two weeks ago. I think it was last week, where he created a base class and for his plugin, and he made it generic, and he implemented iPlugin on the base class, and then on the top level class he didn't implement iPlugin because it inherited from the base class, right? So it automatically has iPlugin. You can call it a feature. I will call it a bug with the implementation in CRM for how it determines what a class, whether the class implements iPlugin or not. If you have anything in the chain, anything in the inheritance of that class that's generic, it will not see it as iPlugin unless you explicitly label it as iPlugin on the top level. And that bit Tanguy where he had made it generic, and so now when he went to go run the plugin, it just never ran because it didn't see it as an actual plugin. Even though you register it, even though it looks like it's good to register, it won't actually work. So that's maybe there should be a feature to go through and check if you've done that. You haven't explicitly listed the class as being iPlugin when it has a generic base class. Because I don't know how many hours it's probably sucked out of people's lives across the world, but it's quite a few.
I can imagine. I can see why that would happen. Yeah, I can see how that would happen though, because if you're using reflection, it's sort of generics look really weird on reflection, don't they? You get this. So they're probably doing some kind of string comparison on the hierarchy or something, and it's being hidden.
There's a simple function
generic.
to call to check to see if it's like convertible to it. I think it's like kind of the easiest way to do it. Is this type convertible to that type? Versus trying to see if it actually implements this interface. So anyway, so that maybe that's a feature I'll go ahead and request. Because man, that one bit me. And I've had 2 war stories today. How many war stories do you think I can have? I got
keep
a war story
coming
from Scott and one from Imran now too. We need more war stories. People have done stupid things and hit themselves in the foot.
Well, the classic plugin registration war story is when you register something on every single message, and then you end up. I mean, lots of people must have done that, because Jonas has got is it Canary? I think he calls it.
Yep.
And that's quite nice, and that's what that does, right? So it registers on every single message. But if you've got some logic that specifically you want to implement and you accidentally register on every single message, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah. Or if you dork up, I think it's like the retrieve a system user.
Yeah.
If you do something with that and you throw an exception, like then it just brings the whole system down, because like that's the first thing it needs to do is access your system user record. So I've done that before as well. Basically, you had to like wait an hour for it to like clear all the caches before you could actually like unregister it and clear it all out. So it was kind of fun.
I wonder if there's a way of registering a plugin that kind of basically bricks the whole server. I wonder if you can do, if there's something that you can...
That does it.
Really? So that's it. Once you've done that, you can't unregister it. And what do you have to contact?
It bricks it where you can't undo it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's right.
You're building a virus.
That'd be a cool hackathon. Rather than doing a hackathon where you try to create some little Canvas app, we should have a hackathon where we try to see if we can break CRM. Well, I think the good news is because it's been in use for so long and online for so long, they've kind of caught those things. Like when Gus Gonzalez has that story of him going through and like running like 5 million workflows and basically crashing the async server on the actual online service. So I think he got a message from Microsoft directly after that. It's like, hey, stop doing that.
A polite little message. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yep. And since then, I think they've managed to keep you from doing that. But yeah. Who knows?
I think I've been on tenants that have had him as a neighbor, to be honest.
I think I've been that noisy neighbor for other things before too. Who knows?
Usually just hammering on the wall.
Yep. It's the infinite plugin loops. Those are always fun. Although they stop those after like 7 updates, or seven steps. But yeah, it's easy to do. Yeah. Well, Imran, you got any other war story? Or you have a war story you want to share?
No, that's it. That's it for now, I guess.
Dirty laundry you want to air? Okay. All right. I'll be the one that shares all my dirty little secrets of ways that I've looked less than brilliant. So, so Imran, is there anything else you want to we missed before we let you go and get you back to your day?
Oh, I think we covered pretty much everything.
Yep. So if people want to reach out to you, or if people want to offer to help to implement some of these features that are sitting out in the logs on the issue tracker on GitHub, how can they do that?
Yeah, they could contact me on LinkedIn, Twitter. My Twitter ID is Imran Akram 365. They can email me at imran@biznamics.com, or just join the GitHub repo and just let me know what you're gonna work on, so we don't step on each other's shoe.
Awesome. Well, Scott, that's how our listeners can get a hold of our guests. How do they get a hold of us?
Well, you can send an email to us with ideas for future episodes or just any general comments at cast@xrmtoolbox.com or on Twitter and LinkedIn at XrmToolcast. We should start running some competitions, I feel. I just felt as though we should have a competition, Daryl. What do you reckon?
I like competitions. I'm competitive.
Yeah.
And I like introducing competition to people.
Yeah, I think this would be good. It would be a good opportunity for people to get in touch with us as well, because I'm sure we've got at least one listener, right? So maybe a couple, who knows? But yeah, competition, we feel like it'd be a bit of a two-way street there.
Okay. And what's the competition? See how many people can respond?
But yeah, let's give me a chance. Don't put me on the spot. I've literally just thought of this idea.
Okay. All right. All right. Well,
we'll have to come up with some swag as well. Let's come up with some swag. Yeah.
All right. I like that idea. I like that Imran volunteered to provide all the swag. Thank you, Imran. Appreciate that.
Did I?
You did now. No.
Great response. No. Did it? Wait, what?
All right. Well, Imran, thanks for maintaining that tool, and thanks for that work. It's kind of a thankless job sometimes, but we appreciate it, and thanks for everything you do in the community.
Thank you so much for having me.
Till next time.
This has been the XRM Toolcast with Jonas Rapp and Daryl Labar. If you have any questions for Jonas or I, or suggestions for future episodes, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com or tweet to XrmToolcast.